to show you the game I've been working on. I call it SCRAP, which is an acronym that stands for Scavenge, Collect, Reclaim, Attack, Prevail. Um, it's a pretty full conversion of StarCraft's rules. I have 2 custom factions, a couple of custom mechanics as well. What's that buzzing noise? It's weird. So right now I'm just kind of going into the game to kind of show off some of how it works in its current state. Nothing too terribly exciting. I don't have any playtesters. I just thought that I'd kind of go through the ins and the outs of the game, where I want to take it, where it is now, that sort of thing. So this is the first game I've ever built, from concept to it's basically feature complete at this point. After I release the mod publicly, my plan is to continue adding content, but I've got to the point where I'm happy with the content that's in it for its what I'd consider to be its launch. So as I said, the game currently has 2 factions, the Fabricators and the Dendrites. I'm going to be demonstrating the Fabricators first. They were kind of where the idea for the game originated. They were the first faction that I built. I'm continuing to tweak them. I got a little more ambitious with my second faction, so I'm kind of trying to... I really don't want to have an easy faction and a hard faction. That's kind of a Command and Conquer style thing where you have one faction that kind of responds better to micro. I don't really want that. I'd like both factions to kind of have a parity in how challenging they are to play, even if the challenges are different. So okay, we're loading in. These are the Fabricators. This is the titular unit of the faction, the Fabricator. It is a multi-purpose construction vehicle. It builds all the buildings for the faction. It trains all the units, and it's pretty much your primary tool for interacting with the game. So from the get-go, this I don't know if this feels substantially different from StarCraft. You build your base, you capture these power nodes, you actually build all your buildings, not all your buildings, most of your buildings, on these power nodes, like so. So I have 2 buildings that I start out with access to. But you build the buildings on the power nodes, so you capture the base by building a generator, and then you can build on it. The power nodes are the only way that the Fabricator can gain energy. You have to kind of come over to the power node and it'll give you its energy. So these little guys here, are scrappers. Obviously they're using the Widowmine model, but they're a harvester and a combat unit, kind of like Warcraft 3's Ghoul. My intent with the Fabricators was to have a series of kind of obvious, but my intent was to have interesting choices. So you see, I very quickly mined out the 2 starting resource deposits, and these structures actually will turn into resources when they die. So I kill it, and then it explodes and drops more resources. And you saw that just building a couple of units really quickly depleted my resource reserves. Comparatively, things cost more in this game than they do in StarCraft. Units take longer to die, they have more hit points. And there's actually a mechanic that I'm going to demonstrate a little later that kind of goes into that whole longevity thing. So anyway, I was talking about the Scrapper. The Scrapper, as I said, is a combat unit and a harvester. So the obvious challenge there is if you go into combat and you lose Scrappers, you're actually decreasing your overall ability to continue to harvest resources. So you either have to be very careful about how many Scrappers you bring along, or you have to be very careful not to lose them. So that's the first unit of the faction. The other unit that I started with is this guy, this science vessel. In my game, it's called a relay. It's a support unit. It provides supply for your army, and I had some confusion about that, so I've added an icon there that shows what it does. So you always kind of have that ability to just check on that and know what you're dealing with. So they provide supply, and they also have a very weak weapon, and of course they're flying units, and they have 2 auras. See that blue glow there is an aura called Response Protocols. It shows you on the tooltip what it does. It increases acceleration and move speed, and up to 2 relays can stack that buff. So the optimal is bringing 2 relays along to get the full effects of the move speed buff. Now, in combat, they have a second buff they can switch to. And this is Defensive Protocol. This buff decreases incoming damage, and again it stacks. So with 2 applications of that buff, it decreases incoming damage by 20%. That is both an economic and a combat upgrade. You can see that it's actually pretty substantially faster with that active. And obviously that's stuck on the building. Come on. Oh, he can't get through. Oops. I'll show you. So the recycler is called the recycler for a reason. He can actually sell buildings or units for their full cost. But one of the uses for the relay is in mining. It makes scrappers move to and from their destination a lot quicker. Now, obviously, with a mobile drop-off unit like the recycler, that's not a huge deal. But there are situations that the fabricators can get themselves into where they have to chain quite a long way to gather resources. So it could be useful. I'm going to move him a little further away. I want to show off. So when scrappers are carrying resources, they actually have a little icon over their head. My thought is that the scrapper has a flame attack. So what it's doing is it's smelting down the scrap and carrying it in like a energy field above its head to drop it off in the recycler. So you can see you mine out very quickly as the fabricators, and you're kind of always moving around looking for the next stockpile of scrap to go through. I'm not playing very, I'm trying to show you how the game works, and I'm not really trying to play the best that I can. So I'm accruing a lot of bonus resources. But in scrap, you're always trying to find the next place to get resources. This game doesn't guarantee a constant production rate like virtually every other RTS does. you have this kind of fits and starts, these bursts of income that you then use up over time. I'm just building all of the structures so I can talk about what they do. So the first structure I built is the engineering module. That has the most upgrades of any structure in the game, actually. These work like the Terran upgrades. They increase armor and attack only for the Fabricator, but there's 2. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then you have to pick one of these. So you can either increase the Fabricator's attack speed, you can increase his movement speed, or you can increase his health. You have to pick one of those, and once you've picked that upgrade, you're stuck with that for the rest of the match. Now, also, every structure in my game does 3 things. It unlocks a unit, or a structure. It has some sort of passive effect, and it has research. So, in this case, the engineering module unlocks upgrades for the observation module. I'll talk about that in a second. It unlocks the recycler unit, which is this drop-off. I've talked about it briefly. I'll go into it again more in a moment. And it actually has a heal ability, which I can demonstrate real quick. The survival module has 5 upgrades. It also unlocks the ability to deploy landmines. Both the Fabricator and the Recycler get that ability. So you drop the mines, and then 7 seconds after they deploy, they become dangerous. They are invisible, so you need a detector to see them. However, they will not explode if only a detector is in their radius. So if you are scouting with a detector unit, the mines actually won't go off if it's the only thing in their radius. Okay, so I'll demonstrate the heal effect real quick. Okay, I also want to demonstrate so you see this guy's become critically damaged, and he's gained this effect called Damage Systems. He attacks twice as slowly, not quite because it's being offset by this buff. So he attacks, it's doubled his attack rate, the time it takes him to attack. But it's also halved the amount of damage he takes. So that lets you kind of get the unit out of combat. Now if I come over here, it also disables all unit abilities, so now he can't gather resources. So you don't have to kill a unit to make it useless. For instance, if I take this Recycler and I reduce him, I don't want to overdo it. Actually, let me demonstrate the attack speed thing. So he'll attack twice for every one of his attacks. Okay, so you see it's disabled all of his abilities. And we come over here. You see it's healing them over time. Now every tick... That's a pretty big... What's the range on that? I need to decrease that range. So, and it also costs resources. So, and damage systems last until the unit's at full health. So these guys are topped back off, and are able to go back out onto the field. Now he also gains a version of that via an unlock. So, you have your little force here. I'll come back to the units in a moment. Let me talk about the rest of the structures. So I was on the survival module. These are all mutually exclusive. This changes the weapon of the Fabricator. You can actually research these as many times as you want. but it swaps out the Fabricator's weapon. So his default weapon is the Impact Driver. Let's see, he's so we switch that out for the Cascade Arc. And then there's the other weapon is the Laser Array. So let's take a look. This weapon, the Cascade Arc, actually deals area damage. It's a much, much smaller range, and deals area damage. So that doesn't happen to allied units, but... And the third weapon is the Laser Array, and that's basically an artillery type weapon. You can swap it out as many times as you want. This is ground only. It's got a very long range. So you can swap it out as many times as you want, but you've got to pay each time. The other choice is between an area damage ability called Flame Dispersal and Solar Cell, which enables passive energy regeneration. So every time I build a unit, it spends energy. And after a couple of units, see, now I can't build them anymore. So he's got to go back to a base to recharge before he can continue using units or abilities. It takes quite a lot to fill him back up with energy. So you can see, just kind of futzing around, I've spent almost all of my resources. I have to deal with these radiuses a little bit. Yeah, they're probably a little too big. So we're on the Fabricator. So pretty much everything he does spends energy, and he's got to continually retreat to base to recharge. And you may notice that he seems a little faster than he did in the beginning. Or you may not notice, but he actually is. So the generator has a passive effect. Each generator you build makes the Fabricator do everything he does faster. He attacks faster, he moves faster. See, his attack speed is increased, his move speed is increased. Now, if you lose a generator, that actually will decrease by a little bit. So I have 3 generators. The maximum stacks you can have is 5 of that build process accelerant buff. But as you gain and lose generators over the course of the match, that will impact the actual power of the Fabricator. So that's pretty much what he does right now. Let's talk about his units. We've already talked about the Scrapper in detail. We've talked about the Relay. You may notice that the Relay's aura is now green. That's because of this structure. It actually improves both of the Relay's auras and changes them so that you can very clearly see when that's active. So the improved version of this aura decreases incoming damage by a total of 40%. So it's much better than than the base version. And the boosted version of the speed aura boosts it. Does not increase the movement speed, but it also increases attack speed up by up to 20%. So it stacks up pretty impressively. Of course, losing a relay will decrease that, and it'll also decrease your available population count. So when Fabricators commit to battle, they have a lot at stake. Okay, so let's talk about these little guys. These guys are Junk Slingers. They're a glass cannon. They have energy, and they spend energy when they attack. A little fight down here. The game does have creeps. It takes much longer to kill a unit once it's gone into damaged systems. Substantially harder. And you can see that when you kill a unit, it doesn't go away. It leaves behind a burning wreck. And when that timer runs out, whatever hit points the unit has will convert into resources. So as units die, they become stores of potential value. It's a little different than, say, Supreme Commander, where they were immediately available for harvest. So you'd attack someone, you'd lose your army right outside of their base, and they'd get a bunch of resources. That's not how this works. Now, this may be right outside of my base, but I can lose this base very easily. This structure dies and... well, watch. This structure dies and this will leave my... I won't own it anymore. It'll fall neutral. While that's going on, so you see he's full up on energy now. He's got 110. Every time he attacks, it decreases by I think 5. Costs 5 energy per attack. He also has this targeted ability that deals area damage. Also costs resources as well as energy. So right now it's just kind of the Ravager's attack. Now watch what happens when they run out of energy. See, their attack actually changes, and they actually lose range. They've got to pull in, and their attack slows down. So they become more vulnerable when they're out of energy. Of course, the Fabricator loses a lot of its functionality when it runs out of energy. This is the Ram. It has very high hit points. You can see these guys have 110. These guys have 145. This guy has only 80. These guys have 240. See, the building has become neutral. Did it again. So now I own it again. But because it has no power, it can't do anything. So you have to wait until the structure has been rebuilt and is providing power again before you can actually make use of your... Ta-da. Now it can heal me again, and I can research the upgrades. If I had the cash, Joe. So the Ram is pretty beefy. It's also got a lot of armor, so it's very hard to kill. It attacks very slowly, though, so its weapon speed is 6. So it's not really a high damage unit. But what it does, much like the Marauder, is it actually slows its attack target, and also in an area around the attack target. So this is, again, kind of a utility unit. It's there to take hits for your other units, literally tank damage for them. And more than preventing an enemy unit from escaping, the Ram is about preventing enemy units from closing in. It slows down how fast they can then get up close to your more fragile junk slingers. Also, of course, when the enemy is in range, it keeps them in the range of your scrappers for longer, which is a little up in the air as to whether that's great or not. If you're keeping a high damage enemy very close to your army, that's obviously not a good thing. So there's one additional structure we haven't talked about. That's the pattern coprocessor. What that does is it actually gives the fabricator an additional build queue, which I would show you, but I can't afford anything right now. It has 3 research options, and it unlocks both the RAM and the Junkslinger. Now, since this game is kind of designed around losing your bases, the upgrades in this actually permanently unlock one and only one of these units in the match. You can choose to permanently unlock the RAM or the Junkslinger if you want to always have one of those available. It also has an unlock that research that unlocks the Recycler's heal ability, turning it into a very potent support unit. In addition to permanently unlocking the RAM or the Junkslinger, it also decreases the cost and build time slightly of those units. I've been talking for half an hour, and I'm still not through. So let's see. The final unit in the Fabricator's arsenal is the Sensor. This guy is actually a little nastier than you might think. He's a detector, just like the Raven or the Observer. But unlike the Raven or the Observer, he has a tactical utility. He prevents energy usage in a small area around himself when he's stationary. So if I fly him over an enemy Fabricator, that Fabricator can't build units, and he can't do flame dispersal. If he flies over a bunch of Junkslingers, they actually can't attack. It just suppresses their ability to spend energy on their attack, and thereby prevents them from attacking. Now, he's this fragile little thing. You'd have to build a lot of them, in theory, to make them useful. So what I did is I actually made them benign. Enemy units do not attack them. You can fly them right over the enemy army, and unless he spots it and actually orders an attack on it, it'll just sit there and stop everything. Now, what it also does, so long as you have a memory module, is it prevents almost every enemy ability. It stops passive abilities. It stops virtually every buff and debuff in the game from firing, so long as he's stationary above it. So basically, he's kind of a flying no button that also happens to be a relatively fast scout unit. Of course, they're very fragile for this game. So, and that radius, I believe, is his detection radius. He got a pretty big AOE for his detection. So that's the Fabricator's unit list. I've showed you his weapon switching. I'll show Flame Dispersal. I've showed you how losing and gaining a base works. Let me talk about scrap a little bit. So scrap is a little different from minerals in StarCraft. It comes in deposits, but the health of the deposit is equal always to the remaining resources of the deposit. And what that means is, if I can't harvest it, if you're going to come chase me away from this this nice little pool of resources here, what I can actually do is attack it. Now, no unit does decent damage against scrap. That just wouldn't be fair. But I can deny you some resources by coming over here and picking away at this. Or I can sneak units over to near where you're mining, if I'm feeling daring, and attack your resource deposits to lower their value. Now, where this can be particularly useful is in a situation like this, where there's a little bit of scrap left over after a battle. So you see, this has left some relatively small scrap deposits behind. and it makes it a lot easier to put a hurtin on that scrap. So it takes a while, I'm trying to balance it, so you can't just go murderize their resources. Trying to think if there's anything else off the top of my head that I need to show you. There is an alternate victory condition, but I'm completely redoing it, so I don't feel like there's a lot of point in showing it at the moment. So that's why. Just thinking, why is that brush not working? They have flying units. So you see he has much faster attack speed and movement speed. If I destroy this, then that will decrease. Yeah, I think that actually harms both enemy and allied units in an area. So watch what happens. It decreases. And when I build it again, it'll increase again. So that's pretty much, at this point, the state of the fabricators. I'm relatively happy with how they handle, for the most part. And I'm just kind of tweaking damage values and movement speeds and stuff. Before launch, I may add up to one more unit, an upgrade that converts the scrapper into something else. I haven't firmed out on that, but it's something I'm thinking about. So that's the fabricators. I've spent now 42 minutes talking about them. Okay, so let's switch over to the dendrites. I can spend less time talking about them because I've introduced the core mechanics of the game already. So just give me a moment. Okay, so my other faction are the Dendrites, and they're fairly different. They're considerably different from the Fabricators. So switch over to the Dendrites and give it a go. Unfortunately, it takes a little while to load in. So there's some definite bugs. There's some issues I'm still working through, but for the most part, I'm pretty happy with how this is all shaping up. Okay, so right off the gate, the things are pretty different. You don't have one big guy. You see these harvesters. When they harvest, they drop off to themselves. So there's the self-contained resource processing system. Obviously, it's a giant floating probe. But I chose that model to kind of indicate, this obviously is your harvester. But he just returns to himself. So you have a lot more autonomy with these guys. This is an assembler, and it's kind of like the fabricator, but, well, let's show you. So when the assembler builds something, it doesn't build it, it actually turns into it. So you're spending assemblers to build units and structures. So, slightly different. The only place you can produce an assembler is from an axon, but each axon adds a separate build queue. So where the fabricators can build up to 2 units at a time, and the more generators they have, the faster they produce them, you actually can build more units the more axons you have. So over the course of a match, the dendrites can pump out more units at a time. Now, of course, they need to. They actually have a higher population cap than the fabricators. I thought that made sense and was fair because the fabricators have the fabricators, this giant death colossus. The axon also is the supply building. Each one gives you half of the supply you need, so you can function perfectly fine on 2 axons. But of course, you get some really direct benefits from owning a lot of them. Assemblers are expensive and big. They have a lot of hit points. They have almost as many as the RAM from the fabricators. And so when they build something, oftentimes it's free or at a pretty reduced cost because it already factors in the cost of the assembler itself. So assemblers are almost a secondary resource, and I've tried to make it interesting to determine when and where you'd want to turn them into a unit. So the first building they get access to is the consensus buffer. What that does, it actually makes the axon it's attached to, see that cable there, it looks like it's attached to the axon. But only the one closest to it, it will improve the build time from that one structure. So where the fabricators, where all of your buildings and units are in service to the fabricator, with this, it's all kind of add-ons to your local axon. Your axon kind of is the base. The one thing you really care about and want to preserve. So you see I've got this pretty nice little force of assemblers here. They can't do anything. They have a weak attack. Slightly better than the relay, but so you don't want to actually fight with them. But they can turn into units as well. The units I have access to right now are the concussor and the reclaimer, or the imbuer. These are concussors. They use the model for the sentry, the proto sentry, and what they do is they have an area of effect attack. You see, they also have energy. Now, what they do is like the Junkslinger from the fabricators, they spend energy to attack. Unlike the Junkslinger, they actually have a stacking buff. And the lower their energy is, the less damage they do. And the higher their energy is, the more damage they do. And that's broken into 3 breakpoints. So you have Energized Blast 1, 2, and 3. And each one adds damage. So you can see when he's fully charged up, he deals a lot more. He does more than twice as much damage. And as they attack, that will steadily decrease to their base damage. So now it's only plus 10. In a moment it'll be only plus 5, and then it'll go away. So they're really nasty when they're fully charged up, but only when they're fully charged up. So the dendrites also have 4 structures. I'm going to build them all now. while those are building, I'm going to talk about the Imbuer. The Imbuer is the Dendrites utility unit. Unlike the Fabricator's Recycler, the Imbuer is combat-oriented. It's your detector. You see his detection range there, so again, he's got a pretty generous range. And when he steps over the Fabricator's landmines, he doesn't set them off. So you can identify them with him and then pick them off with no damage to him. What he also does, and I will walk him over to show you, handy little test units down here. So these are neutral units, and what he does is he steals their energy. Every time that happens, that whirlpool there goes off, he's trying to steal energy from them. I guess I should change that to only hit them if they have energy. But what he also does, and I can demonstrate this too, is he can take control of enemy units. Now, obviously, at first it takes kind of a long time, and then he can't use it again, so he can't use it again right away. It's got a pretty long cooldown. Won't hurt them. Interesting. Interesting. Okay, so we got all these assemblers. Now, once you build this, the surveillance circuit, nope, I'm sorry. The recycler core. It allows your assembler to spawn a small group of these mini Archons here. These guys are called currents. They're temporary units, and when they die, let's see if I can get them to kill one. When they die, they actually act as something of a landmine. So actually injures. There we go. So you can run them right up to the enemy, and even them dying deals a little bit of damage and steals some energy from the enemy. They're a great way to harass a Fabricator. And as many resources as you have, you can spawn a lot of them. And as a Fabricator player, you don't want to see this. This is a lot of nasty little, death robots. Of course, out of the gate, you can't do that too many times. So, the Recycler Core. It also unlocks a turret called the Current Core, which spawns a couple of currents at a time on a timer. Here they are. Spawns 2 at a time. Not too impressive at first. But let's see what happens to this guy when these assuming little currents get close to him. It actually buffs him, and each current up to, so let's move these guys away. So here's his default harvesting rate. See, there you saw him. Now watch what happens when these guys get close. Watch how much faster he gets. It's noticeably faster. Anyway, so currents from a current core can actually improve your your harvesting rate pretty dramatically. Okay, so the recycler core also has a it's got the reason it's called the recycler core is you can, just like the recycler from the fabricators, you can sell off any unit or structure that you own. You get this nice little nanites effect. And my nanites are eating it, and then I get the cost back. Now it does have so the recycler core applies that to its local axon. So you see this axon doesn't have the recycle ability. So if the recycler core were to die, then the axon would lose that ability. Now the surveillance circuit also confers an ability, which is a scanner sweep, exactly like the Terran ability. Lasts just as long. It's smaller and doesn't reveal stealth. But it's a nice little way to scout around. Obviously, also your currents are a good way to scout. And finally, the recycler. So I talked about the recycler core. The surveillance circuit also unlocks a structure and a unit. The unit is the Harbinger, and the structure is the Warden core. So these tiny little flying. They're harassment units. They don't do a lot of damage, but they're one of the faster units in the game. And not a lot of units in this game can attack flyers. So it's still that big. So here's the Warden core. It provides a force field, a nice little damage shield there. Let's see, it's a 30 hit point shield. It doesn't last very long. But it also confers some health regeneration, so that's right, he can only attack. So you see it's worn off now. Okay, so he's taking some damage. Let's come over here and watch what happens when he gets hit by this Warden effect. Let's see, he's now starting to slowly regain health. Now it'll take a couple of applications of the effect for him to reach full health. But it is a way to heal your units and not just have to sell them. It also applies for free in an area. There's the area. Now the shield, once it's applied, see, it still has the Warden effect. He actually can't regain that shield until the Warden effect wears off. So once the shield wears off, he can get that buff. See, his shield's back now. So a very different approach to healing than the Fabricators. The Fabricators are a lot more about keeping their units alive. But you could build this forward right before combat and kind of retreat your units to it as a forward base. Okay, so we've pretty much talked about the surveillance circuit at this point. Our fourth structure is the consensus repeater. Now, you've already seen... So the consensus repeater works differently from the other structures. It doesn't provide a bonus to the axon, but instead to your assemblers. So it actually enables slow, it's very slow, but passive energy regeneration for the assembler. So he doesn't have to continue this. It's kind of a slow unit. You don't have to continually run them back to base to be able to build more currents. Now, the structure this unlocks is the dampener core. I'm going to come down here to demonstrate what that does. Okay. While he's going down there, I'll show you the unit that unlocks, which is the Needler. Okay, so these tiny little immortals are Needlers. They have a very long attack range. You can see the radius there. Longest in the game. But they also have a very high reload every 6.5 seconds. It takes them a heck of a long time. So they're a skirmisher unit. They're pretty fast. They can come in, deal their damage, and get out. That's pretty much what you... And you see they have a very short sight radius, so they need something to spot for them, something like a Harbinger, for instance. So I consider them, again, kind of a support unit. Okay, so the Dampener Core, what it does is it applies stacks of the Dampener effect. Each time it pulses, it's decreasing the attack and move speed of all enemy units in its pretty substantial radius. Now, the cool thing about the Dampener effect, each time it ticks, it refreshes the duration, and also each time it ticks, it applies 1 stack per caster. So if I had 2 dampeners, it would apply 2 stacks at a time. If I had 3, it would apply 3. So it's a maximum of, I think, 5 or 6 stacks. But the longer you spend near this guy, the more pronounced the effect gets. Of course, this is a passive structure. It's a defensive structure. So you've got to walk into its area of effect. Not super useful, but the Imbuer here can actually be upgraded to provide that effect. The Imbuer can be customized as a whole, not each individual Imbuer. But you have basically 2 paths for him via the consensus repeater. You can give him the dampeners, which gives him the dampener aura, or you can half the amount of time it takes to convert a unit, or I guess almost half. And you can also choose to give his default aura a percentage of life effect, so it deals a percentage damage to enemy hit points, or you can vastly increase the range of his conversion while also decreasing the cooldown. So you can make him a conversion machine or kind of this nasty backline spellcaster. You kind of have these 2 options for him. I'm going to do those aura upgrades for now. Not as many of the Dendrite upgrades are mutually exclusive. The other one that's mutually exclusive here is you can either improve the dampener effect, which also decreases enemy attack damage as well as attack speed and move speed, or you can improve the Warden aura, which will increase the shield each unit that it provides to each unit, its radius, gives it more hit points. One of the coolest upgrades that the Dendrites have is this Reclaimer hover engine. So Reclaimers are hover units. They have that little, flyer helper there. It's just a unit flag, but I figure, what happens if you had a way to actually make them fly. So that's what this upgrade does. When this upgrade completes, he will actually become an air unit, being not attackable by ground units, and then he can traverse cliffs. So it definitely is a big improvement to how survivable they are and how quickly they can get to resource locations. So it's a really big change in how they can use this unit. So he's actually got his aura now. You see this has changed. Now you can swap between the 2 auras. So if I come over here, I'll come over to stand near these buildings. You see he actually killed that building by himself. I wonder, will he hurt? I don't think he'll hurt resources. But if he comes over here, every time he ticks now, he's actually dealing damage to them. And he's a pretty beefy unit, so let's see, just by being near these structures, he's pretty rapidly wearing them down. He's actually not. Is he not hurting them? Not hurting them? There he goes. Now it's working. Oh, I think I see why. So he becomes a really nasty backline unit, especially for the fabricators. And if you get, if he spends a lot of time near a fabricator, he could really, put the hurt on it. Or he can provide his own stacks of the dampener effect. So if you have a couple of these and they have a dampener aura, they can really, really cripple an enemy army. Okay, so yeah, now he's a flying unit. I can come up here now. So the Dendrites have a lot of cool toys. Now, the problem is their units are a lot more fragile. He has 180 hit points. His counterpart, the Scrapper, has 240. He has 500. It's the second highest after the Fabricator, but the Fabricator has 3,000. These guys have 240. They're kind of beefy, but they have absolutely no attack. Even though they have the attack button, I guess I should remove that. And are just a liability. Oh, you see I've upgraded their armor. It upgrades the armor of all Dendrites units except the Harbinger, because it's a flying unit and very few units can attack it. These guys actually get a pretty decent armor when they're upgraded. But you see they've got 95 hit points, it's very low. And then the Harbingers only have 80. So, a very different dynamic of hit points. And of course, Currents themselves have 85. So, very different dynamic. A lot of fragile units that require kind of skillful consideration. Where you kind of, for both factions, if you kind of rush blindly into combat, you're doing yourself a disservice. If you let something get close to these guys, they're just going to get wrecked because of their long attack time and as well as their low hit points. These drop like flies without the Warden effect to buffer them. So I think one of my kids is waking up. I have to head out. But that's pretty much where I am right now with both factions. I'm going to try to do some more multiplayer matches, but right now I have to go.